On today's Monday News Pod, the San Diego Padres get swept over the weekend by the Philadelphia Phillies because they hate you. They hate us all. They are a team that seeks to destroy our souls, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be recapping this series full of a lot of misery and then also getting into some of your questions and comments. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Monday, April 29th. As always, I'm your host, with sometimes occasionally, but certainly not always the most, especially after this weekend, Javier Reyes. You may be familiar with my baseball-related work over at Just Baseball, where I write about not just the Padres, but baseball in general. A lot of fun stuff over there, and I also host a podcast for them called Baseball versus the World, if you want to check out my goofy side when we do random eclectic topics on the culture of baseball. Of course, everybody, you can find this show wherever you get your podcasts from. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. Free and available on all platforms, including the old YouTube, where I am rocking, of course, the super cool Padres hoodie. Even though the Padres gave me no reason to want to respect them and bring out the cool hoodie, but I'm wearing it anyway, guys. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. So go check out FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Getting started with today's show, guys. Look, it's a mailbag pod. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to be answering some of your questions. One of you, in fact, messaged me right before I started recording. So shouts to that person. We will be getting to your question in a little bit. A friendly reminder to try and get your questions in, closer to maybe by the end of Sunday night, because I usually try to record as soon as the game's done, just so it's easier for me and my schedule. So just keep that in mind, especially since we're in the thick of the season now. Whew. Yeah, guys, that sucked. That's what's in. I mean, ever since that damn chant of those older folks doing the "man, he gonna cruise" thing, the Padres have just been cursed as a franchise now, haven't they? Especially against the Philadelphia Phillies. Swept this weekend, and it wasn't particularly close. I know that the last game was close, but if not for Luis Campusano's heroics, and we will talk about him in a little bit more later, but this was a bad series, man. I mean, this wasn't even... and I know I brought up this comparison a lot, but like last year when the Giants walked off on the Padres twice, that wasn't what happened here. This was a series where like a team just got completely outclassed and thrown like against a wall, stuffed in a locker, and then left for dead. Like that's what this series was, and it's super frustrating. And I'm not going to be doing my rant thing necessarily today. I mean, I will, but not as, I guess, vociferously as I did it a couple weeks ago, because it's just really tough. We're not going to be doing like play-by-play recap of the games from over the weekend, but this was a weekend in which the Padres starting pitching just completely died. And don't get me wrong, the case to be made that it's not going to be that bad does begin with the fact that it was the Phillies, and that is a very good team. A team that is known for getting hot offensively, and that when they're hot, they're basically the best offense of baseball, more or less. I know that not in terms of the whole full course of a season, but when they're hot, they will put up like 25 runs in 3 games. Like they could just do that. I made up that number, but I actually wouldn't be surprised if they put up 25 over these 3 games. They got 9 Friday, then 5 Saturday, so that's 14 plus 8, so that's 22. So I was close, you know what I mean? I was close. But look, it's really rough. We're going to talk about yesterday's game first. Let's start about that really quickly. 8-6, the final score. Joe Musgrove. I'm sorry, not Joe Musgrove. We will talk about him. Michael King. Michael King, this is why paying attention to underlying peripherals and reading up on just some blogs that I've stumbled upon, whether it be Fangraph stuff, just baseball people that I know, because remember, OGs will remember, as I sit in the trailer for this podcast, I'm not very smart, so what I do is I surround myself with people much smarter than me to learn. And then whether it be Baseball Savant, the underlying peripherals for Michael King were really concerning. And I understand that his last start, he did generate like a lot of whiffs, on a lot of his pitches, and then just had one inning where he just completely exploded. That was at Colorado. In fairness, it was Coors. But in today's game, 5 1/3 innings, gives up 6 earned runs, 3 walks, 6 Ks. He's been really bad, man. Like really, really bad. The number one in terms of home runs given up by starting pitchers this year is Michael King. And he is a living example of why I do bring up peripherals. Don't get me wrong. Like, I don't always like just throwing up the StatCast profile page and then just calling it a day for analysis, because that's just not right. Because there are players that I don't think the StatCast profile does justice with. I think Yu Darvish is a good example. And I talked about this with Arm Layton on Friday's episode about the prospects, but a player like him, it doesn't concern me as much. But Michael King was dealing through those first 3 games. Like, he wasn't really giving up all that many runs, at least for a little bit, aside from the Dodgers game when he was rough. He does pretty okay against San Francisco despite the 7 walks. Then he balls out against San Francisco again. Then he's okay against it's just, he's so inconsistent. He's either doing what happened against the Dodgers, which is where he gave up home run after home run, or he's doing what he did against the Brewers when he's getting batters to miss and he gets 10 strikeouts, only gives up 1 earned run. Or he does what happened this weekend where he's just getting killed. And by the way, while yes, the Phillies offense is really good, Bryson Stott has had a terrible year for the Philadelphia Phillies. He's one of the only batters that hasn't gotten it going, despite having like a career year last year. His slash line up to this point was 210, 275, 284. Like, he was literally the epitome of not slugging, right? And he's actually not really known for that in general. He had 15 home runs last year. Like, he just didn't. And instead, in this game, goes 2 for 3 with 4 RBIs, 2 home runs on the night. Even steals a base just for fun, as a treat, I guess. Just not what you want to see. And it just completely killed the Padres early on. It does stink because I think that this team showed a little bit of fight, right? Top of the second inning is when the scoring starts. Bryson Stott hits the home run. And then you get a Tatis double and a Jake Cronenworth home run, who, by the way, has been awesome. And he's another reason why you look into the peripherals, because Jake Cronenworth has actually been a little bit unlucky in a lot of ways. He looks so sharp. And when he's on, that swing is dynamite. It looks like a golf swing, and it's awesome. So shouts to Jake Cronenworth. But then you give up another Bryson Stott home run. You give one up to JT Realmuto. You give up a single. It's just not, it wasn't great, right? He didn't look good. The only positive that you can say about Michael King was that his velocity was noticeably up in the beginning of this game. He threw a couple harder pitches, which was good, because that is something I've been concerned upon. And I forgot who it was, you might be listening or watching, that brought up the point that he is converting. Now, don't get me wrong, he did have a couple starts at the end of his Yankees tenure, but he is basically converting from reliever to starter. So maybe that might explain the velocity dip. I know, but for me, a pitcher like this, that worries me. And he just gets lit up again. The Padres have a real problem with starting pitching. This was one of those weekends that really showed that. And while I imagine I will get a comment saying, well, what did you expect? They lost Snell, they lost Hader and all this stuff. Yeah, but like, there's a difference between being worried about the pitching and being like, oh, I told you so. Joe Musgrove would have the highest ERA in baseball at this point, and Michael King and him would have given up the most home runs, and Yu Darvish would be on the IL. This is more of this. The Padres' rotation is frustrating for a lot of reasons. They're frustrating because it is so emblematic of what the San Diego Padres have been all these years. And what that is a team that every single time they have some great developments, they have something that's so bad that it almost cancels it out. I.e., for example, Eric Hosmer all those years, right? You have Tatis and Machado, but then you have Hosmer being a black hole. You have the last year, frankly, where you have what's it called? You have the pitching so good that you have Blake Snell winning a Cy Young, Josh Hader being the best closer, Juan Soto being awesome, but then you have the fact that every single batter outside Juan Soto and a little bit of Tatis and a little bit of Kim are horrendous with runners in scoring position, to the point where it's almost like historically bad in the clutch. And then this year, a good example would be that you have Jake Cronenworth back. Jackson Merrill might be a Rookie of the Year guy, and Tatis looks like he's back at MVP form, but then Xander Bogaerts looks like he should be in Double-A. Right? That's one of the really frustrating things about this team. And the same thing applies to the pitching, where you have Dylan Cease dealing. And I know he gets hurt this weekend. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Or not hurt, like gets, hit, I should say. Like in the start. He's not injured. No, don't worry. Please don't. Knock on wood, right? But instead now you have this situation where Dylan Cease has been so on fire, so immediately good for your team, which doesn't feel like it's something that happens with the Padres. And then Joe Musgrove, the most reliable starter, dare I say, or one of the most reliable starters in all of baseball, and that's not hyperbole or bias, just turns into a pumpkin. Darvish gets injured, and Michael King, the same guy that Yankees fans were complaining about because the Padres dared to ask for some value in return for one of the best bats in the sport, has been dreadful. Right. And this is this is not what you need. I would rather have someone who doesn't get a lot of strikeouts and just going to give me 6 innings and maybe give up 3 or 4 runs rather than just the gem start that he had against Milwaukee. And then we never know what's going to happen, right? Like, too inconsistent. That's what's so frustrating about this Padres team, man. And we're going to keep talking about it in a little bit. Again, I'm not going to be recapping the games like game by game or anything like that, like in a really in-depth detail, because it was 3 games, because there's too much to talk about. But before we continue, folks, before we get into the next segment of this old podcast, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a peek into the world, ladies and gentlemen, of DoorDash. Folks, we love DoorDash. Look, you saw some baseball this weekend. You want to make sure, man, you're strapped with your food and you don't want to necessarily leave, and DoorDash has you covered. Ladies and gentlemen, for 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend 15 plus on your next flour. By the way, yeah, more than just food. Don't worry. Flour, convenience, groceries, whatever. I used it this weekend to pick up some empanadas because I was a hungry boy. So you can check that out, guys. It's really, really great. And also, you know what's coming up? Mother's Day, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to make your mother very happy and joyful and joyous and exuberant, whatever, you could check out DoorDash. They've got you covered to surprise her with gifts from the brand she loves, delivered the same day with DoorDash. Gotta check it out, guys. This Mother's Day, get something thoughtful for your mom on DoorDash. Surprise her from wherever you are with fresh boutiques, the latest tech, gift cards. Heck, you want to get some chocolate? Oh, maybe you go check out a bakery near you. Oh, I just gave you guys an idea for free. So go check that out, guys. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place. Get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend 15 plus on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Locked On MLB. Order using DoorDash today. Terms do apply, though. Go check that out, folks. And then also, I just want to give a quick second. You guys know I'm a competitive son of a gun. You guys know I love beating my friends. And you know what? Monopoly Go helps me do that because they are just, it's a full-fledged Monopoly game. The Monopoly that you know and love, but they've given it a couple upgrades, folks. And I really love it. It's fantastic. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments. Where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you can unlock. I know we've already talked about this already. All right, whatever. I don't care. We still got to talk about it. You've got unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. And I am a big collection enthusiast. Hey, I'm a video game man. For people who don't follow me on Twitter, I am a video game man. I love collecting things, and Monopoly Go has you covered there. Cool new playing pieces you can also get to travel the boards with. So not just necessarily, you don't want to just stick with the iron or even the car that everyone always picks, right? Or the top hat. It's the car or the top hat. I was always a car guy as a kid, but whatever. They've got you with all the pieces, and they've got all these emojis for taunting your friends and smashing their buildings to smithereen, folks. Don't you want to do that? Don't you want to take a wrecking ball and just be disrespectful of your friends? Well, Monopoly Go can help you do that. There's timed events. You can work with your friends. There's new tournaments. There's new offers. All sorts of stuff. Always fun things to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now, free on the Google Play or App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. And just like that, we are back, ladies and gentlemen, after a little bit of a break here on the Locked On Padres podcast. Let's keep it moving. I want to quickly mention Luis Campusano and Graham Pauley this weekend. Big home runs for both of them. Not necessary for Graham Pauley in terms of the game context and the leverage situation, but I do love that he did manage to get a home run in this game. I'm sorry, not in Sunday's game, but in Friday's specifically, where he hit one towards the end of the game. He goes 1 for 4, 2 RBIs, a 2-run home run. I just love it for him. I hate that he then sat the next day on Saturday. Now, don't get me wrong, understandable because it was a lefty, but I'm just saying that it does. I understand it. Basically, what I'm trying to say is I would rather, if Graham Pauley's up, which we can debate whether or not he should be up or be sent to the minor leagues to work on some stuff. He has been really lost up there. Either send him down to the minor leagues or give him some consistent at-bats against righties, and Tyler Wade needs to be on the bench, and he could be like a pinch runner. You know what I'm saying? Like, for now. And then Eggy Rosario, because he's been really great this year, and especially against lefties. That's what it should be. That's what it should be. But anyway. Also, in Sunday's game, Luis Campusano making the game close for a second, making it 7-6 with his pinch hit home run. Campusano has been a really plus catcher offensively this year. I don't think I really need to tell you guys that. He's got a 105 WRC plus, so he's been really good. 105 isn't great, but compared to what I'm sorry, he's got a 115 WRC plus, my mistake, updated after today. Don't get me wrong, that's not like incredible, but you have to keep in mind the average for catchers, and I believe the average WRC plus for catchers, at least last year, was around 89. So just to give you some perspective. But in terms of WAR, he's not all the way up there. He's only got 0.2 right now, and that's because the defense has been really bad. And I don't know if it's going to get fixed. So don't get me wrong, I still love Campusano, and I think the combo of him and Higashioka, I've said before, I'd rather have Higashioka catching for some of the more unsettled pitchers, maybe someone like Cease, but Campusano at the very minimum, it's very cool just seeing a catcher that can hit. I just wish he wasn't so porous defensively, and thus far, he has not shown me that he's going to get much better. It feels like he's losing strike calls. He's not throwing out runners. Runners look really confident when he's behind the dish, so that's a problem, you know what I mean? So I really wish that he could be better in that respect. Maybe it will change. I don't want to assume it, but I'm just disappointed. Right? That was one of the reasons I was hyping him up this offseason, is because I thought he could at least just be normal defensively and not bad. And if he was normal defensively, we'd have ourselves like a top 10 catcher potentially. But instead, he's just a fine role player who I love touting for being a good bat, because I always said he would have a good bat. And he does. So shouts to him. And then shouts to the Grand Pauley home run. Moving on, though, in terms of the pitching, we got to talk about Saturday's game. Let's talk about Dylan Cease really, really quickly. Doesn't go well for him in this game. Again, they were hot. Alec Boehm gets a home run. He's been on fire. I talked about it with Connor Thomas of Locked On Phillies on Friday. He's been just swinging it. I mean, he's been just unbelievable lately. And he gets to him top of the first inning, allowing Trey Turner also to score. Bryce Harper draws a walk. Alec Boehm gets a single. So basically, Alec Boehm just kills this guy. And then the walks piled up. Look, bottom line though, as a slash line for a guy who'd been really good for a while now, 6 innings, 5 earned runs on 6 hits, 3 walks, 5 Ks, like that's really not that bad. He's still got a whip under 1, and he's still got a 2.78 ERA. Like, he's still been really good. It was an unfortunate time for his regression to kick in, and it's really frustrating that the Padres didn't let Ranger Suarez have any regression, who's currently got a 1.32 ERA on the season. And don't get me wrong, he's been like a solid starter, but like 4.18 last year and then 3.65 the year before, that's not exactly like we knew this was coming. And of course the Padres aren't able to. They do score 1 run, which I appreciate, off of with our guy Eggy Rosario, who does hit a home run in the bottom of the 8th, finally stopping his scoreless streak. But really Padres, and really frustrating that one of these two guys was going to regress. I think that's what everyone would have said. They were going to have like okay, this is their first bad start. God forbid it be the other team, right? Just God forbid, because this team is we're just tortured. We're cursed. What can I say? So basically not much else to talk about in that game, to be quite frank with you. Well, there is one thing to talk about, which is Adrian Morejon. 3 innings, 5 Ks, only 2 hits, no runs. We'll talk about him a little bit later because we got a mailbag question, but that's basically it for that. Offense just dies. Only 3 hits on the night. Just really rough game. But again, Dylan Cease, like, I'm just not concerned, really. I'm just checking it off to a bad start, and the fact that the offense didn't support him. At least he still went 6. You know what I mean? And it's going to happen. He's going to have those walks. He did have the walk with the bases loaded, but that's one thing about him, which gives him Snell comparisons, which is that he can be a little bit wild sometimes. But nonetheless, still good. Not worried about Cease in the slightest. Who I am worried about, though, who we got to talk about, is Joe Musgrove. On Friday's game, Friday night, starting off a big series, you're 14-14, got to bounce back from that disastrous game against the Rockies. And how does our boy Cotton Eye Joe, Java Joe, I should say, stand out? He does not in a good way, but he does stand out. 3 2/3 innings, giving up 7 earned runs on 8 hits, 2 walks, 4 Ks. His ERA is the highest among all qualified baseball starters. All qualified pitchers in baseball, among starting pitchers in baseball, at 6.94. He's been dreadful, and it really stinks because he looked like he was showing some signs in the last game, and even the game before, frankly, but he's been rough. It actually doesn't feel like he has the highest ERA. I do think it was slightly inflated because he did start off horribly, giving up 5 to the Dodgers and just 2 2/3, so I think that was part of it. I think he's going to get it together, but it has been really frustrating for Joe Musgrove in the early going. 4 home runs in this start, most in a single game against him, I think in his career, or at least since with the Padres. That's really rough. Highest ERA, like I mentioned, among qualified starters, and King is first in home runs given up, Joe Musgrove's second. Unlike Michael King, though, I really do think that there's some trust that should be here with Musgrove. He has been really bad. One good news, he did hit 94 miles per hour, his hardest pitch of the season, and he did generate some whiffs, right? He did generate some whiffs in this game. We always love to see the whiffs. You know I'm a big whiff guy, right? But he just couldn't get them. And I do think part of this has to be chalked up to the Phillies just being a really good offensive team. But again, I don't know. And it's just really frustrating. I recommend everyone checking out Dennis Lin's story in The Athletic, breaking down his start even further, talking about what he worked on in the offseason, alluding to kind of the fact that Musgrove, he did get shut down last year, so maybe that's part of it. And kind of I hope that's what it is, right? Like I said, he does get 3 whiffs on the splitter, but I'm kind of hoping that this is just, maybe he's just a little bit banged up and he's still actually low-key trying to get back to it. Maybe that's why the velo's down, because again, there was really no warning signs that Musgrove was headed a bad way. I can find warning signs for Blake Snell. I can find, and what I mean by warning signs, by the way, obvious warning signs. Again, I'm not the smartest person in the world. I don't know all the, in-depth zone breakdowns and stuff plus necessarily as some other people do, but there weren't any immediate warning signs for Musgrove. Again, he'd been really consistent. So it's really frustrating for him to be bad. I have confidence that he's going to get a little bit better. And in general, this weekend, I'm going to save that actually for the next segment, but I really do think that he's going to get at least somewhat better because he is still Musgrove and I do have some faith in him. And again, I think the ERA doesn't fully point to it. He's still at least been able to go innings. He's not getting hit with too many home runs at least. No, that's a lie. I don't know. I was trying to find a positive and then I literally contradicted my point I said earlier about second most in home runs. So I don't know. I just have a little bit more faith. I'm really worried about King. I'm worried about Darvish's ability to stay healthy and all that stuff. And I'm still worried about Musgrove. I am. But I'm hoping that he can turn it around because, again, did get up there with a velocity. He has talked about the injuries and whatnot. I just think he deserves a little bit more. Is it possible that, that 3-year stretch he's had with the Padres was, maybe the peak? Sure, but I don't think this guy's going to turn into a total pumpkin for the rest of his career, right? That would just be really weird, especially since, like I said, no obvious glaring issues, with FIP, velocity, whiff rate, all that stuff. Nothing gigantic. So, again, hopefully he gets better. What I will say, though, finally, before I close out talking about the pitchers, the one thing about this is, with the way that Musgrove and King have been, plus the injury to Darvish, it's really frustrating. And I talked about this all offseason, but the fact that the Padres kind of had this rotation, that was a good thing because we said, what do the Padres always do? They keep rushing their prospects. They had no reason to rush prospects. With the way that Musgrove and King have been going, and with the Darvish injury, and not like it's going to be a guarantee that when he gets back, he'll stay healthy. Unfortunately, we are looking at a situation where they might be called up sooner rather than later. I'm talking about Robbie Snelling. I'm talking about Adam Mazur. Not Dylan Lesko. I think he's still a ways off. But those guys might get called up. I don't love that because it was never supposed to be something we relied on. It was supposed to be a bonus that we were hoping for. So, yeah. Really, really rough stuff, guys. But before we close out this podcast, very sad, I've been so, monotone today. It feels like to me, maybe, I don't know, leave a comment. But, man, just such a frustrating series. We're going to answer some of your questions and give some final thoughts in just a little bit, ladies and gentlemen. But first, I want to take a second to talk to you about our good friends over at FanDuel. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. And guess what? Baseball's still in full swing. Obviously, you're listening to a baseball podcast. You know this, duh. And let me tell you, FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's right, 150 buckaroos whether you win or lose. Bet on everything from the dunks to Nikola Jokic assists, turnovers, rebounds, steals, three-pointers, points, boards. He'll probably hit all of them. It just seems like he's a guaranteed bet these days, right? So go check that out. Also, of course, show love to your Padres over there on FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. It's safe. It's safe, secure, and easy to use. Don't worry about all that. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And just like that, we are back, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Locked On Padres podcast. By the way, hopefully for video listeners, there was a new little intro, and audio listeners too, frankly. The little new intro that we got going for the show. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let's get into the mailbag and final observations part of this podcast, guys. I want to just give a simple thing about this. My good friend, my Australian homie, you know who you are, has been messaging me being like, man, Padres Twitter really like giving up. Some people messaged me saying like, do we need to rebuild? Shouts to you, Rob McMurdy. That was a longtime listener of the show who asked, do we have to rebuild? No. Rebuilding it's way too early to start talking about rebuilding. I think that there's a difference between raging about the team versus specific players. And don't get me wrong, I did say a while ago that I'm not mad at Padres fans for raging, because after last year, the PTSD from that, I think that it's really earned. And not to mention, they're still selling out games and the team just isn't showing up. I think it's more than okay to complain, especially after last year. I'm just saying that, like, I think we should be looking more at individual players like your Bogaerts, like your Musgroves and Kings and whatnot, versus just giving up on the team entirely. 14-17 is not, you know what I mean? You can't just give up in that sense. I still think there's just way too much season left, but you can complain with verifiable facts and information about certain players. So no, it is way too early to talk about rebuilding. But that being said, man, not great. Last thing I want to mention, Jeremiah Estrada. He unfortunately got announced like after I recorded my podcast on Friday, but he did make his debut. He allowed a runner to score. It was an inherited runner, but still. But the velo was good. 3 whiffs on his splitter. Not too shabby for the kid. Look, this Padres bullpen is legit. I don't care what happened in the Rockies game. I mean, I care, but I don't care about what it says about the Padres bullpen. I think it's going to be great, and I think they're going to have more arms. I think a guy like Estrada, even if he gets sent down, is someone that you just have hanging out just in case one of these other players don't work. I think their bullpen's going to be good. It's about the starters. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Let's look at some of your questions and comments that you sent me. And oh boy, we got some fun ones. First up, from Michael Carlin, because we were just talking about the bullpen. From Michael Carlin, at Michael Carlin6 on Twitter. Hi, Javi. Question for the pod. Is the Adrian Morejon experiment finally paying off? He looks like a legit bullpen piece now with 10 times better command and solid stuff. Along the same lines, could Profar actually be reinvigorating his career, or is this just another fluke start to a season for him? Ooh, 2 questions, 2 great questions. I think I'm going to kind of go with on the latter part of your question. Michael, thank you again, of course, for your questions, guys. You can DM me on Twitter at Javapeno or send YouTube comments, whatever. I usually check everywhere, like right before I record. In regards to the latter of that, I think that Profar can do what he did with the Padres just a couple years ago. 2.5 wins above replacement. Not great defense, but like an okay batter who sees a lot of pitches, is pretty good in high leverage, and frankly just provides something else that is unquantifiable, which is just the good vibes. I will say though, man, Profar just hasn't stopped, and I feel like it's been like a decent enough sample size where I'm starting to actually wonder if he's turning his career around. He has a good weekend, 1 for 4 on Friday, 1 for 3 the next day, and then 2 for 4 yesterday, including a double and a walk. Like, he's been looking good. He's got a good walk rate. I'm very confused, ladies and gentlemen, about Jurickson Profar, because don't get me wrong, I do think he can reach 2.5 wins above replacement, and that's great, by the way. Like, I've been high on this guy, but in terms of everything else, is he getting a little bit lucky? Yeah, of course. Like, in terms of his weighted on base, sure, but like, his weighted on base is 344. That's not bad for a guy you're paying $1 million for. Or I'm sorry, his weighted on base is 380, and his expected is 344. It's not the craziest difference I've ever seen, and most importantly, it's like fine if that was what ended up happening. Like, I'm totally cool with that. The fact that he's been putting together like pretty solid at bats, and his walk rate is what's most impressive. 14.2% walk rate is much higher than anything he's had since 2017, which was 12.9%. I think that he can be like this really solid player. Now, I don't think he's going to continue this level where he's like leading off and sometimes is the cleanup hitter, but I'm just saying, man, he's not too bad. And if you look at the StatCast profile, it backs it up too. And I just like that he puts together good at-bats. Almost always, consistently, in high leverage, medium, low, whatever it is, it seems like he puts together good at-bats. One thing that can be frustrating about your Tatises of the world is that they get a little bit too jumpy. And don't get me wrong, those are the type of batters you got to trust to be jumpy because they can hit it so hard and be so great, like him and the Machado. But I like that he doesn't do that very often. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like he's swinging immediately, which is probably why they put him in the leadoff spot the other day. But I don't know. Like, I'm not totally out on it. He's 31. right? It wouldn't be the most insane thing we've seen. Could he be a 3-win player? Maybe. The defense isn't great, which is why Azokar gets subbed in for him sometimes, but I've been really impressed, guys. I think that version of him, at minimum, from 2022 is back. I really, really do. That's how confident I am. In terms of the former part of your question, because I spent too much time, sorry, I just get distracted by Profar. What can I say? In terms of Adrian Morejon, I don't fully understand all the metrics for pitchers, but one thing that I will say, he has some of the highest pitching and stuff plus stuff in baseball. It's a metric that I am still trying to personally understand a little bit more. But more importantly, he is getting a lot of batters to whiff. And that was one of the things he didn't do before. Adrian Morejon has always had the talent. Always. Like, genuinely always had the talent. By the way, I forgot to mention that Cosgrove got hit. Cosgrove, that xFIP from him last year might have been more telling than we thought about it. It was like a 4.8 xFIP, despite his 1 point whatever ERA. Anyway, with Adrian Morejon, he's always had the talent. There was a reason why he was a big international free agent signing. But for me, I look at this and say, what has he figured out? Well, for one thing, like I said, he is getting batters to chase. He's getting them to whiff too. He's always had an amazingly fast fastball. That's what made him so exciting in the first place. And it's one of the reasons I talked about before the season, where I was like, look, I think the starter experiment has clearly failed. He just can't work that way. But, hey, could this be a new Drew Pomeranz situation where, like, Drew Pomeranz was kind of not a great starter and then he converted to reliever and was great? Hopefully, without the injury part that happens. I'm kind of believing it because we've seen that he had the talent before. This isn't some no-name who's come out of nowhere. Like, Adrian Morejon's velocity has always been excellent on that fastball. And if he's getting batters to chase and whatnot, it might not even matter that Tom Cosgrove seems to be falling apart from what he delivered last year. Because my thing is, if you got Adrian Morejon, who went 3 innings, by the way, against a Phillies lineup that was killing Padres pitchers all weekend, 3 innings, 5 Ks on only 2 hits, I'm impressed, man. I think Morejon is legit. I do, because he's always flashed this before. So maybe this flash is more substantive because it's in the bullpen, a new role. So yes, Michael, great question. That's what I believe for now. Again, I don't fully understand all the stuff plus stuff, but I do think it matters that in those certain metrics and more advanced metrics, he's among some of the top relievers in the league. I do think that means something. So I want to give it another week, and this Padres certainly will with the way that he's pitched lately. I want to give it a little bit longer, but I am very, very impressed. Let's move on, though. I've talked a lot about that. From my guy, Rama Murdy, question for Monday's episode. If you are AJ Preller, what do you do to get this team going in the right direction? Currently, nothing. I would tell him if there's anything you can do to make sure that you aren't giving away at-bats to Tyler Wade, and then because he touches the grass with a hit once every 6 games, that means you have to keep playing him. It does seem like they're getting over that little kink they had for, dare I say, Tyler Wade lately? Inappropriate word, sort of, but you get my point. I don't think there's too much he can do right now. I do think, though, if you aren't going to give Grant Pauley consistent at-bats, send him in AAA. Come on. Let's just do that. You shouldn't be losing at-bats to Tyler Wade. And if Eggy Rosario is just a platoon guy, which I think he deserves a little bit more credit, by the way. I think he could be better against some righties. He had a couple hits off them. Then send him down and then keep Tyler Wade up. I don't know what it is. Make up your mind. That would be the only thing that I would say that AJ Preller can personally do right now. Next one. It's Abdi and then at Abdiaz, I can't say your name. Abdiaz, I'm going to just call it. Responding to my Joe Musgrove thing, he had one good year, which was a contract year. Since he got his money, he's been trash with the trash can emoji. That's just false. That's not true. Joe Musgrove has been among one of the, like I said, one of the most consistent starters in the entire league. 3.05 ERA combined over these last few seasons. And also, by the way, some big playoff performances too. Cannot forget that. He has been dreadful, worth -0.6 WAR, but this is not a one-hit wonder. In fact, his ERA totals from the last 3 years, 3.05 last year, 2.93, and then 3.18 the year before that. And if you even want to go with the Astros, 3.86 ERA. Not that bad with a really good strikeout rate. That was in 2020, but still. Basically, ever since then, he's been really electric and good. That's not that. And it's not like his FIP was high last year, nothing like that. He's good. And it wasn't just 1 year. Not true. Literally not true. But last year was half a season, more or less, and it did look like maybe that injury might be carrying over just a little bit into this year until he figures things out, hopefully. But that's just not true. So enough with that nonsense. Next up, though, we got some YouTube comments. Oh boy, we always love these. At Rolling Rizzo 1291, Padres are like the Dominican Republic's national team. I don't totally know what you mean. If you mean like Dominican players and they tend to underwhelm in big spots, then I do get you. So I sort of get what you mean. Luis Enriquez 6810, send down Pauley. I think he should work on left field. They'll probably end up trading him. I do think he could work on left field. I think that would be a good idea. I wouldn't send him. I would only send him down if they are going to keep starting Tyler Wade. I don't think they should, but if you're going to do that, then send down Grant Pauley, give him some extra reps, give him consistency, by the way. Don't send him down there and then call him up and again, because we did this with Campusano and look how that turned out, right? So that was annoying. Please don't do that. I'm begging you, AJ Preller. They'll probably trade him. Yeah, who knows? Maybe this is the AJ Preller thing where it's just like, if the prospect I call up isn't amazing immediately, then he's getting shipped out, and I'm just like, whatever. I don't know. We'll see. Next question, though. At 24 Tommy Street on YouTube, this team is more fun than last year's team, to me at least. Seems like more of a team without the 3 one-year left stars just buying their time for a fat contract. Yeah, I will say so. Like, this team has had, like, so many more moments. The 8-run comeback, the Dodgers series, heck, even the Brewers series for a little bit until they lost that last game. Like, they've had much better moments. You have the Merrill juice. Merrill madness is real. Although I will say with Jackson Merrill, you're starting to see some of the problems of the fact that he hasn't tapped into power. And, again, he's still been so good for a rookie. I'm not concerned. But that's something that's going to take time, as I talked with Arm Layton on Friday, so go check that out. So yeah, I do agree. This team has been more fun than last year. Next question, at Tony Sue 8860, Dylan Cease's game. Oh, this isn't even a question. It's just a comment. Dylan Cease's game at Coors was historic. Never before had any pitcher pitched only 1 hit and no walks over 7 innings. If that's true, wow. I did not know that. I knew he was great and was an amazing start. I mean, I titled the episode after him, so that's why. But that Tony Sue has another comment saying, not sure why so many pundits aren't noticing, but third base is currently a pretty standard Rosario-Wade platoon. Depending on the starter, one of them starts, and even later in the game, if a relief pitcher enters pitching the other way, then a switch is made automatically. Wade doesn't appear to be playing more for any reason than pitching matchups. Yeah, I don't know if you were trying to take a shot that I don't notice this. I do. I've totally seen this like plenty of times. My issue is, what about Tyler Wade shows that should be getting everyday starts? That was my issue, right? Like, there's nothing about how Tyler Wade has conducted his career and how he's hit that suggests he should get the at-bats 100% of the time, which is basically what keeps happening. And then Grant Pauley just sits there. You know what I mean? I don't get it. And then also, there have been a couple games where Tyler Wade hit against the lefty, by the way. There have been a couple. Not too many, especially as of late, but have been a couple. So that's why I've been complaining about that. So don't worry. I noticed. Last comment is just a positive one. At LFGSD Padres says, bruh, your podcast always brings a positive vibe to my day, even when you are critical of the pods. Other podcasts are always on a down vibe, except for mine, of course. Let's go. Shouts to you, my friend. Also, go check out his podcast. Thank you. I do try to keep it positive for the most part. This has been a relatively sad episode to recap. It is very frustrating. I think the way to view the Padres right now, and I know this is dumb, but it is a rule that I have personally carried out. It is a personal rule of mine, which is when you have players performing so bad that weren't expected, Musgrove, Xander, Michael King, I don't believe it usually. I will say with King, I am believing it a little bit. I'm worried that King might just be a bust and that they might need to hope that Mazer or Snelling comes up and replaces them and are very good, so that way they can put Michael King in the bullpen where he has been excellent before. Maybe that's what they'll do. I hope we're not in that situation already. But I think that that's just what I do. Xander Bogaerts, what does he have, like a 59 WRC plus at this point? Right? Like, just part of me has to believe he'll get better, right? You have to believe that Musgrove gets better. It's just they've been so bad that it's hard to believe it. Right? Like, it's hard to believe it. So what I would tell people coming from this weekend, it stunk, but it's way too early. There have been teams that have started off like this before. I know it was brutal, though. Don't get me wrong. If you're like really upset and don't want to watch the Padres this week, and you're like, hey, wake me up when they're good again, totally understand that, especially after last year. But to me, the positives are this. I think the bullpen's awesome, and as the case with Estrada, for example, and with Morejon as of late, can get even better and fill out and be better than some of those guys who haven't been so great, like your Cosgroves, like your whoever, right? Wandy Peralta a little bit. then you have some reinforcements, and then Suarez, and then Santos has been awesome, right? He's been electric this year. He's been awesome. So, right, I think the bullpen's going to be good. The offense, you have Jake Cronenworth and Jackson Merrill who've been awesome. You have Jurickson Profar who's been awesome. Yes, Xander Bogaerts has been bad, but I think you have to look at, there's been overwhelmingly more positives, and not necessarily positives that we knew would happen. We knew Tatis would probably get better this year, but we didn't know for sure that Jake Cronenworth was. We didn't know for sure anything about Jackson Merrill. So there's been some positives. So that's what I would say. Look at it as, if Musgrove was a 4.4, like a mid-4 ERA guy, I would be like, that's not that crazy of a downgrade, but to be the highest ERA in the majors, that seems a little bit unbelievable, right? So give it a little bit of a second. And same thing goes for Michael King. And same thing goes for Xander Bogaerts. Like, he's been dreadful, and I am really worried about him. But you have to at least hold out hope that he's been so bad that it's like, in his second year, he's going to be about as good as... I don't want to name a player and be mean, but he's going to be as good as, like, Grisham at the plate. He's going to be worse than Grisham at the plate in year 2 without any current, I don't know, injury designation. Maybe he has a hip thing. I don't know. Look at it that way, guys. Just try to look at it that way. But with that all being said, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Reds this week, and who else we got? It's the Reds, and then we will be in May, and we face the Diamondbacks for the first time. That should be fascinating. And by the way, Diamondbacks aren't the only. We're not the only team with weird underperforming stars. Like, Corbin Carroll got dropped in the batting order. So, like, give it a second. Give it a second. Don't give up hope, guys. This has been a surprisingly optimistic podcast from your boy, considering what happened this weekend. But I don't know. I wanted to change it up a bit. Until that next time, though, guys, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful, my Friar Faithful homies. Take care.